My family refused to help me with my business because they chose to invest in my cousin instead. But now that he failed and my company is successful, they call my company the family business. I'm Zachary, I'm 34 years old, I'm a man, and I grew up in a family that, well, lived comfortably. My dad owned several businesses scattered around the city, real estate, retail, and a few others. My mom owned several buildings. Yes, plural. My grandparents, although they weren't as wealthy, were the first entrepreneurs in the family to become successful enough to give my parents their initial push. There's an expectation that if you're born into this family, you either inherit something and don't screw it up, or you build your own empire. Naturally, I wanted to go with the second option. I wasn't some naive kid dreaming about opening a beach shack in the Bahamas, not that there's anything wrong with that. I had a plan, a solid one in my opinion, cybersecurity. Ever since I was 14 and accidentally hacked my school's server to change my detention record, I discovered that I had a talent for computers. I went to college, graduated with a degree in computer science, and spent countless hours obsessing over encryption, data breaches, and programming. After graduating, I realized that cybersecurity isn't just an interesting career, it's also lucrative. Every company needs it. Every bank, every hospital. It's like selling umbrellas in a world where it's always raining data breaches. I had a vision, a potential customer base, and a detailed business plan that I thought would impress anyone. But there was one problem. I needed money to get started. A lot of money. I wasn't asking for millions, okay, just enough to rent office space, hire a small team, and invest in the initial software and hardware. Could I have started with less? Sure, but I had a very clear picture in my head of what I wanted the company to look like. One morning, I approached my parents. We were sitting in the living room, and I presented my idea to them. I had charts, market research, and passion. I asked them for a loan. I didn't want a gift. I didn't want free money. It was a loan that I would repay with interest once the business took off. They said, "Zach, we love you, but we don't think you have what it takes to run a business." They didn't say it cruelly. My dad sighed as he said it, as if rejecting me physically hurt him. My mom gave me one of those pitying looks mothers give when they think you're being adorably naive. My dad explained that being a good programmer doesn't automatically make you a good businessman. Running a company means, well, actually running it, handling accounts, employees, investors, losses, all those boring, unglamorous parts. And according to them, I simply didn't have that spark. To them, investing in me wouldn't have been investing. It would have been throwing money away. I'm not going to lie, that hurt. At first, I was angry, really angry, but I still didn't want to give up on my dream. A month after my parents rejected my request for funding, my cousin Bernard was getting married. It was a huge, extravagant wedding. 3 days of events, champagne fountains, the whole show. At one point, I was standing with my parents near the buffet table when Bernard came over. He greeted my parents, shook my dad's hand, and then said, "Uncle, Aunt, thank you again for believing in me and helping fund my hotel business. I couldn't have done it without you." I just stood there staring at Bernard as if he had confessed that he was a time traveler. My parents laughed nervously, said something polite, and quickly changed the subject. I had asked for funding. They said no, but Bernard got funding for a hotel, a freaking hotel. I walked away with some stupid excuse because I felt betrayed. Not because they funded Bernard, I mean, good for him, I guess, but because they wouldn't do the same for me. They trusted Bernard, but apparently their own son wasn't worth the risk. At some point, my grandmother found me sitting there. "Zachary, what are you doing out here? Why aren't you inside enjoying the wedding?" There's something about grandmothers. You can't lie to them. You just can't. So I told her everything. She simply let me vent. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Zachary, sometimes people see potential in others because they see a version of themselves in them. Maybe your father sees a younger version of himself in Bernard. But that doesn't mean you aren't capable. You're different, and being different isn't bad. It's just different." She squeezed my hand and added, "You're smart. You work hard. Someday you're going to build something incredible. It'll just be on your own term." I know it sounds like a collection of cliches, but it was exactly what I needed to hear at that moment. The day after the wedding, I was still in this strange emotional haze, half motivated by what my grandmother had said and half devastated. I was sitting on my couch when my phone rang. It was my grandfather. Now, my grandfather wasn't the kind of person who called just to chat, so naturally, I panicked. I asked if everything was okay, and he told me everything was fine and that he simply wanted me to come see him. I just said, "Okay, Grandpa, I'll be there in 2 hours." When I arrived at his house, my grandmother opened the door and gave me a warm smile. "Come in, Zachary. Your grandfather is in his study." I was sitting in his chair when I walked in, but he immediately stood up and hugged me, and at that point I started to relax a little. My grandfather didn't waste time on small talk. "Your grandmother told me what happened at the wedding and how you feel about your business plan." "Oh, so that was what this was about." I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. He continued, "I want you to know something. I started my first business with nothing more than an old van and a loan from my uncle. It wasn't easy, and everyone thought I was going to fail, but I didn't. Do you know why? I shook my head. Because someone believed in me. Sometimes one person can make all the difference. Then he reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a checkbook, wrote something down, and handed it to me. Now, I'm not going to tell you the exact amount, but let's just say it wasn't pocket change. It wasn't everything I needed to launch my cybersecurity company, but it was enough to get started. Enough to make a real difference. I stared at the check for what felt like 5 full minutes. Finally, I managed to say, "Grandpa, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he said. "This isn't just money, it's trust. I'm investing in you." I was trying with everything I had not to lose my composure, but my grandfather simply stood up, walked over, hugged me, and said, "Make us proud." On the drive home, I kept looking at the check. It wasn't just money, it was proof that someone believed in me. After receiving the initial funding from my grandfather, I knew I had to be smart with every cent. I didn't splurge on fancy desks or modern office chairs. We started small. I contacted my 2 best friends, Adam and Lewis. We pooled the little money we had saved and rented a tiny, cramped office in the most dangerous part of the city. But hey, it was ours. Those first 2 years were brutal. We worked between 14 and 16 hours a day. We barely took weekends off, and I survived on instant noodles and vending machine snacks. Lewis went from one call to another, Adam was buried in code, and I, well, did everything at once. Our first major client was a mid-sized financial company that had just been hacked. We managed to repair their systems, recover their data, and prevent future breaches. That project gave us enough money to move into a slightly better office. Little by little, we started gaining traction. Word of mouth began spreading, and we started landing bigger clients. About 4 years later, we reached our first real milestone. We had enough revenue to consider expanding. We opened our second office in a nearby city, and a year later, we opened a third in another major city. By then, we were no longer some improvised little startup. We were a real company. Around that time, we also started a cybersecurity consulting firm. It seemed like the natural next step. Companies weren't just asking us to fix breaches, they also wanted to prevent them proactively. And let me tell you, consulting money hits differently. About 5 years after starting the business, I was finally in a position to repay my grandparents. I drove to their house with a check in my hand and told them, "This is yours, with interest." But I didn't stop there. These 2 people had given me everything when no one else did, so I bought them a new house. Nothing ridiculously extravagant, but warm, comfortable, and in a neighborhood they had always loved. Watching them walk around their new home, pointing out little details they liked, was one of the most rewarding moments of my life. While our cybersecurity business flourished, Bernard's Hotel didn't. The pandemic completely crushed the industry, and Bernard's Hotel never fully recovered. Apparently, my parents gave him even more money to help. But despite their efforts, and honestly, I feel bad for him, the hotel eventually closed. So last weekend, we were celebrating my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. Because they are literally the reason I have everything I have today, I wanted to make sure I continued showing them how grateful I was for what they had done. I spared no expense. I rented a beautiful hotel ballroom, hired Catherine, arranged for a live band, and invited basically all their friends, relatives, and even some old neighbors they hadn't seen in years. Honestly, planning that event felt more emotional than some of the biggest business deals I've ever closed. The party was spectacular. Everyone was dressed up, the food was incredible, and my grandparents were incredibly happy, which was what mattered. But then my parents entered the picture. At some point during the evening, I overheard my dad talking to one of his old friends. When his friend said he must be proud of me, my dad responded by talking about family values and how his support and guidance had put me on the right path. He also mentioned how it was practically a family business now. Excuse me, what? I hadn't misheard him. As the evening went on, I kept catching pieces of conversations where my parents painted themselves as the backbone of my success. We always knew he would do something great. We supported him every step of the way. That's what we do as a family. We lift each other up. And the punchline? My dad said, "It's all thanks to the family's early support." Look, I'm not saying I needed my parents to kneel in front of me or apologize with tears in their eyes or anything like that, but taking credit for something they actively refused to support? That did not sit well with me at all. I tried to enjoy the rest of the night, but I was genuinely angry, so I changed my speech. Originally, I had planned something simple. A heartfelt tribute to Grandma and Grandpa. But after everything I had heard that night, I knew I couldn't let it slide. I started on a light note. I made a couple of jokes, mentioned that their marriage was older than the internet, and talked about the love and respect they had always shown one another. But then I got serious. And here's that part of my speech. You see, Grandma and Grandpa didn't just build a life together. They built a legacy of love, trust, and most importantly, faith in people. When I had a dream and everyone else shut the door in my face, they opened theirs. They didn't just believe in my idea. They believed in me. And everything I have today, I owe to the faith they had in me when no one else did. I paused. My parents were staring at me with frozen smiles on their faces. So tonight, I want to raise a toast to Grandma and Grandpa, the only 2 people who believed in me when no one else did. This success belongs to them, and no one else. Grandma was crying. Grandpa nodded with that calm, proud smile of his, and my parents were forcing smiles through clenched teeth. About 15 minutes after the speech, my dad found me near the dessert table. He was basically yelling at me. What the hell was that speech? Were you trying to humiliate us in front of everyone? Humiliate you? I just told the truth. You didn't believe in me. Grandma and Grandpa did. My mom joined in. You didn't have to air the family's problems in front of everyone. You made us look terrible. At that point, I was already biting my tongue, trying not to explode. But then my dad said, "You're acting like we never did anything for you. We gave you a good life, a good education. How dare you make us look like the villains in your little success story?" At first, I wasn't shouting, but my voice definitely got louder. You know what? You didn't believe in me. You had the money, but you gave it to Bernard for his hotel without thinking twice. And when it failed, you gave him even more. But when I came to you with my idea, you told me I wasn't the business type. That was when I realized the room had gone completely silent. The guests were staring. My cousin Bernard, the one with the failed hotel, was awkwardly sipping his drink in a corner as if he wanted to disappear. My dad pointed a finger at me. "You're being ungrateful." And I answered, completely losing control. "Ungrateful? Why? No, I'm not ungrateful. I'm just saying out loud what everyone already knows." My chest felt tight, my face was hot, and I realized I had just caused a scene at what was supposed to be a celebration for my grandparents. I looked around and saw my grandmother watching me with a gentle, sad expression. Not disappointed, just sad. My grandfather had his arm around her as if he was trying to keep her calm. That was when the guilt hit me. I didn't say another word. I simply turned around, walked out of the ballroom, and didn't even grab my coat. I got into my car, slammed the door, and sat there for a few minutes staring at the steering wheel, trying to calm down. I didn't sleep that night. I replayed the argument over and over in my head. The next morning, I received a text message from my grandmother. "Zachary, we love you very much. Please don't feel bad about last night. We understand you." But that didn't really make me feel any better. I've been thinking about it a lot. Reddit, did I go too far? Did I ruin a night that was supposed to be for my grandparents? Update 1. I think it's only fair to give you an update because you've all been so good about commenting on my post. I thought things would calm down after that night. I thought maybe everyone would reflect for a while and then we could have a proper, adult conversation. But no, my parents decided to go nuclear. It started small. A cousin texted me something like, "Hey Zach, is it true that you manipulated Grandma and Grandpa into giving you money?" That's what Uncle said. At first, I laughed because, come on, it sounded ridiculous. But then the calls kept coming. An aunt sent me a message on Facebook saying she was disappointed in how I had used my grandparents' emotions to get money out of them. So I immediately called my grandmother because I needed to know if she was okay. She said, "Don't worry about what anyone else says. We know the truth, and that's the only thing that matters." Honestly, she's the sweetest woman in the world, and hearing her voice calmed me down a little. But I couldn't ignore the fact that my parents were out there inventing a twisted narrative. I'm not someone who likes confrontation, despite what my meltdown at the anniversary might suggest. But this time, I couldn't let it go. I called my parents and asked, "What the hell are you telling everyone? Why are people calling me saying I manipulated Grandma and Grandpa?" My mom replied, "Well, didn't you cry to them? You made them feel sorry for you. That's manipulation." I said, "I wasn't crying to them. I told them what I was going through because that's called having emotion." I heard my dad speaking in the background. "You can interpret it however you want, Zachary, but everyone sees you for what you really are now." I told them, "Okay, perfect. Tell everyone whatever you want. I'm tired of trying to explain myself to you." And I hung up. I thought hanging up would give me some peace, but it didn't. Over the next week, the rumors only got worse. One relative said they had heard I threatened to cut Grandma and Grandpa off if they didn't give me money. Another said I had bragged about manipulating them and laughed about it afterward. I felt like I was losing my mind. I mean, how do you fight something like that? It's so absurd that it almost seems funny, except it isn't funny when people you care about start believing it. One day, my cousin Bernard, yes, that cousin, even called me. He said, "Hey man, I know things are complicated right now, but do you think you could talk to Uncle and Aunt and fix this?" I said, "There's nothing to fix, Bernard. They know the truth. They're just choosing to ignore it." I sent my parents a text message. "I can't keep doing this. You've made the decision to spread these lies, and I can't keep trying to convince you otherwise. I'm going to step away from this relationship for now. I love you both, but I can't keep letting this hurt me." And that was it. I blocked them on social media because they were posting passive-aggressive things about me. I stopped responding to relatives who were clearly only looking for gossip. I'm in a strange place right now. If anything happens, I'll keep you updated. Update 2. It's been a while. A long while. I wish I were coming back with better news, but life doesn't always want to give you good news. My grandfather passed away last month. The only good thing I can say about it is that he went in his sleep. In a way, It was peaceful, but man, it still hit me like a truck. I don't need to explain in this update how important he was to me, and I don't mean because of the money. I mean because of his support and because of the example he set as a person. As soon as I got the news, I packed a bag and drove straight to my grandmother's house. She looked so small and fragile when I walked in, but she still managed to give me a weak smile and a hug. I don't think I've ever hugged anyone that tightly in my life. Organizing the funeral was difficult, but I needed to do it for my grandmother. My parents were there too, and although we were civil, there was this strange tension in the air, as if we all knew there were unresolved issues but nobody had the energy to address them in the middle of our grief. The funeral itself was beautiful. Honestly, hundreds of people attended. My grandfather was one of those genuinely good souls, and seeing how many lives he had touched was overwhelming. Old business partners, childhood friends, neighbors, people came from everywhere to pay their respects. I tried to hold myself together during the eulogy, but man, I lost it halfway through. My grandmother squeezed my hand the entire time, and I'm so grateful she was there because I don't think I could have gotten through it otherwise. Now, this is where things became a little complicated. My grandfather wasn't incredibly rich or anything like that, but he owned a few properties, including a beautiful lake house. It was the kind of place you'd see on a postcard. A wooden dock, huge windows overlooking the water, surrounded by trees. My dad spent a lot of time there as a child, and even I have memories of running along the dock, fishing with Grandpa, and roasting marshmallows by the fire. So during the reading of the will, the lawyers began listing the assets, and then we got to the lake house. My grandfather left it to me and my cousin Laura. For context, Laura is the daughter of my dad's sister. She's honestly great, someone I get along with really well. But the moment my dad heard the words, "Zachary and Laura will share ownership of the lake house," I swear I saw his jaw tighten. He didn't say anything at that moment, but his face said everything. He was furious, like genuinely furious. After the reading, he left without saying a word to me. My mom followed him, and I just sat there awkwardly with Laura and my grandmother. During the next few days, while I stayed with my grandmother, my dad avoided me completely. If we were in the same room, he acted as if I were invisible. My mom gave me those strange half smiles but didn't say much either. It's unbelievable to me because it's not like I asked for the lake house. I didn't even know Grandpa was going to leave it to me. But somehow, I felt like my dad saw it as another personal attack, as if Grandpa were taking my side in some imaginary war. Laura and I talked about it one night over tea. She admitted that she also felt uncomfortable because her mother, my dad's sister, wasn't exactly happy about the will either. But at least Laura's mother wasn't acting cold toward her. One afternoon, while I was helping my grandmother sort through some of Grandpa's old things, she sat down with me. "Your grandfather loved your father very much, Zachary, but he also saw how hard you worked, how much you struggled to prove yourself. He wanted you to have something that meant a lot to him." I think she knew I felt guilty about the whole situation, as if I had unintentionally caused an even bigger divide between my dad and me. But my grandmother said something that stayed with me. "Your grandfather wasn't choosing sides. He was choosing love. He loved you, and he loved Laura. That's why he wanted both of you to have a place where you could always feel close to him." The night before I went back home, I ran into my dad in the kitchen. He was making tea, and I was filling a glass with water. For a moment, there was only silence. Neither of us said anything, but then he spoke. "You know, that lake house was supposed to stay in the family. It was supposed to be ours." I replied, "It still is, Dad. I'm not going to sell it. I'm not going to turn it into a rental property. It's still ours." He didn't answer. He simply stirred his tea, set the spoon down, and walked out. Update 3. There are a few things I need to deal with now because my father has decided to sue me. He believes the lake house belongs to him, even though my grandfather left it to me and my cousin Laura. I can't talk much about the details because everything is very complicated legally, but I'll try to give you an idea of what's happening. It all started when my dad began showing up at my house unannounced, demanding that I hand the lake house over to him. At first, I thought maybe he was just upset and wanted to talk, but when I refused to give in, he started making threats. He told me that my grandfather's will was wrong and that I was wrong for not sharing the house with him. It was as if a switch had flipped inside him. Then the legal documents arrived. I won't go into detail, but basically my dad's legal team sent me official papers accusing me of obtaining the lake house improperly and demanding that I hand it over. He claims it is his inheritance, not mine, and that I manipulated my grandfather into leaving it to me. I mean, it's ridiculous. My grandfather clearly left the house to Laura and me. My mom keeps trying to act as a mediator, trying to convince me to give in and simply hand the house over to my dad so we can move past this. I'm at a point where I don't think there's any going back. I don't think we'll ever be able to repair whatever has been broken. I don't think you'll get another post from me for a while, at least not until everything settles down and I can give you more details about all of this. Update 4. This update comes a long time after the last one, and believe me, I wish it had come sooner, precisely because that would have meant the entire lawsuit with my father had ended sooner. But it didn't. Only now am I finally able to speak openly about everything that has happened. Well, no, my father was unable to invalidate my grandfather's will and get the house, which would have been perfect for him, as I'll explain explain later. The lawsuit really should have been fairly short, but my father had good lawyers, at least when it came to the art of delaying things, so it dragged on longer than usual. I think he hoped I would eventually throw in the towel and tell him the house was his, something I couldn't have done anyway because it also belongs to my cousin. But not even my aunt joined my father's crusade, and when my grandmother told me that my grandfather truly wanted me to have it, I couldn't give up. Fortunately, my grandmother's testimony was useful during the trial because my father had nothing, absolutely nothing. All he managed to do was spend an astonishing amount of money they didn't have on lawyers. Of course, he also managed to make me spend money too. But if there was one good thing that came out of everything he did, it was that besides spreading his story within the family about how I had manipulated my grandfather, he also spread it to more people, to the point that it was affecting my business. So we played a game of chess, and we sued him for defamation and damages. I don't know the value of the house. Grandpa left us because we haven't had it appraised since we don't want to sell it. But I'm sure what my father lost in legal fees, plus what he had to pay as a result of the lawsuit I won against him, cost far more. Yes, we're talking about those kinds of amounts. And this is particularly bad for my father because part of his obsession with my grandfather's house wasn't about the memories. He wanted to make money from it. He planned to get the house and sell it. In other words, my grandfather's body was barely cold, and he was already fighting over the inheritance because he needed the money. The reason was that the money he had lent my cousin, together with the later loans, had left him in a precarious financial position, and his fight with me made it even worse. Although he can't blame anyone but himself because he brought it on himself. He could have used the money he spent on lawyers to reduce the debt and still have had some financial stability. My parents have had to sell their house. Part of the money was used to pay what they owed from my lawsuit, and the rest went toward covering other debts. They have genuinely been hit very hard financially by that bad investment. They still have my father's business, which, as far as I know, is profitable. However, he has been looking to sell part of it to relieve some of his debts. Someone in the family suggested that I buy it so the business could stay in the family. But having my father as a business partner isn't one of the most appealing ideas to me right now. Besides, it isn't an industry I like or one where I could contribute much with my knowledge. At least I know my father won't have the money to keep suing me over whatever else comes into his head. Edit. My father sold part of his company to a relative. I think that might interest some of the people who asked about it.